everybody. This is Alex with Call It. We have some good and bad news this week. Bad news, Jen isn't here. You're going to notice that she sounds a little bit different, and that's because we have our first guest for episode 10, and that's the co-owner of Pop and Dot Design and Fabrication, Gregg Harrom. Say hi, Greg.
Hi, everybody.
It's his first time speaking on a podcast or a radio platform, so he's a little nervous, but we'll make him feel really warm and welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I need that help.
Yeah. So as always, we have a disclaimer at the beginning of every episode. These are just our opinions. This episode specifically won't dive too much into facts on design or business, on how to operate things. It's going to be more on Greg and his experience. If nobody knows, Greg is my dad. I have gotten in a habit of calling him Greg just for professional purposes. So if that sounds weird, it's because sometimes it is. So disclaimer is, please do not take everything that we say so seriously. It is for fun. These are just our opinions and our experiences. Do you want to add anything to that?
Nope, you covered everything.
Okay, great. So let's begin. Tell us about yourself, where you grew up, kind of a brief history of how you got to be where you are now.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Gregg Harrom, and I grew up in a large family. Started off in Duluth, actually born in Duluth, and large family of 11 kids, 5 boys, 6 girls, and relocated throughout my youth across the northern Minnesota, and ended up around Hawley, Minnesota, going through high school there. Beyond that, I went to 2 years at a tech college in Moorhead, city of Moorhead, Minnesota, in design, electrical design drafting is what it was. And after that kind of set my career. It was making that choice had a lot to do with my dad. He was the second year instructor, and throughout my youth, my dad was a huge influence on how my life turned out, that's for sure. We always had a drafting table in our house, and I picked that up when I was just a young kid. Even through high school, I kind of used my study hall as a drafting course and got credit for that. So it was kind of the thing that felt most comfortable, and that's why when I look at things, I see things more linear and not so curvy like Alex and Jen, that's for sure.
We see things a little more creatively. You have like an exact rhythm and like analytics and reasoning behind things, why you do it. Very mathematical and exact, I feel like.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it started off, I guess, way back when I really enjoyed like drawing buildings. So the architecture was probably my focus, and at the time.
Is there a reason you didn't go into architecture?
Yeah, I guess I don't know. Maybe it was just I didn't feel like maybe I didn't want to spend the time in 4, 5, 6 years of college to go through that. That might have been part of it. I think with my dad being the second year instructor for the course that I took in drafting at the college, I think that made a huge influence, just because it was a 2-year degree and you could get into the workforce much quicker. Granted, it's nothing like being an architect and things of that nature, but it worked for me. And after doing 5 years down in Minneapolis, working for architectural engineering firms, doing various types of commercial and industrial type buildings, it was mostly electrical design is what I ended up doing. It was a real nice career. After 5 years in Minneapolis, so I was kind of tired of the city, so
yeah, I
had to move out of there.
Did you live in the cities or like in a suburb outside?
Actually, both. Started off in the suburbs, and then I actually lived for about almost 2 years out of the 5 years within about a mile of downtown Minneapolis.
Oh, okay.
So
what did
really
you like
cool.
better?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it would have been really cool to stay more downtown and be more minimalistic.
Sure.
As far as
well, and how old
living.
were you at that time?
I was early 20s.
Yeah.
So I was
So
21,
downtown's
22.
place to be, meeting people. So when you're not working, you can have a little bit of a social life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Cool. So after the cities, and where did you go?
Well, I took just a short stint back up in Fargo-Moorhead area for about a little bit less than a year. Then after that time, I had an opportunity to work for a company in Duluth Superior, Lakehead Pipeline. It was which is now Enbridge. That was just supposed to be like a 6-month type contract in their drafting department. And it was nothing that I wanted to continue, but it was, I knew that the company was a great opportunity. And again, my dad had so much to say and so much good things to say about the company for what he knew about it. He says if I could get into it, that and work full time in some fashion, he said that would probably be a good career move for me.
Oh, so he knew about it before you got involved with Lakehead Pipelines then?
Yeah, he knew about the company and knew that people that worked there were working there for a long time. You know, it was definitely a career type company, great benefits, all that kind of good stuff. So, yeah, during that 6 months that I was there, after about 4 months, they had a job opening that was right up my alley. It was out in operations. It was kind of an extension of their drafting department in operations out in the field. So I did that for about 6 years, and it just evolved, and it was great. I am now since retired, as you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know, but nobody else knows unless they're following along on our Instagram page, which everybody should be following, which is our business. If it's a shameless plug, both my dad and I own Pop and Dot Design and Fabrication out of Duluth, Minnesota. This is our podcast. He worked at Enbridge for 30 years, retired almost on the day of 30 years, right?
Yep. 30 years plus 1 day.
Plus 1 day. Couldn't have made it almost perfect.
No, during COVID too.
Didn't COVID kind of jumpstart the retirement thing and kind of...
Well, it was kind of a goal to at least obviously achieve that 30 years. And then I was looking at retiring maybe within a year of probably that date. At least that was my initial thought.
So out of all of the positions that you held at either Lakehead Pipeline or Enbridge, because they're kind of the same entity, what was your favorite?
I think the supervisory role at Enbridge.
Why was that?
Well, I really enjoyed having people work for me, basically have the responsibility of...
You like being a boss.
Maybe so. We'll talk more about that later after the podcast. I guess there's a lot of responsibility, and I like working with people. And yeah, I guess my experience through Enbridge before becoming a supervisor was, I had the electrical drafting, so I had to learn in operations all of the electrical systems and components and all that kind of stuff, which I did. Then I became actually an electrician for 6 years. So before I was a supervisor, I had 12 years in operations. So I really knew the mechanical, electrical real well, and that's where I became a supervisor for electricians and mechanics, that department. During that time, it was just opportunities just came through. We relocated, as you know, several times. And again, those jobs in operations just were a stepping stone. Just one thing led to another. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Do you think that the moves, I know how I experienced the moves, but for you, do you feel like the moves were more challenging personally or professionally?
Definitely personally. One thing with the company, they're great people. So it was never difficult to meet new friends through work. I think it was probably more on the personal side. And then, of course, just having to uproot, you and Mom every 3 to 6 years, that was probably the most challenge. You guys were, huge supporters, and I can't thank you guys enough for all the support that you gave. But, it kind of creates and it makes you, it develops you.
Yeah.
With all those moves, especially socially, because you have to go out and meet
adjust
new
and
people.
adapt. Yeah.
Luckily, I had that with people I worked with. Usually I was at the age with others at work where, fit in.
What was the most challenging move out of all of them?
I think the most challenging was moving to Minot, North Dakota for the first time. But of course, as you know, after we left Minot, for 6 years,
Yep.
we had the opportunity to move back to Minot, and we all took that.
Absolutely.
We agreed.
My dad and I grew up together playing hockey. He played hockey since he was very young, always played men's league. He goaltended and skated out. And then when I was younger, I was in figure skating for about a year and a half maybe. He knew that wasn't right, that it was sick that I was even in that sport to begin with. So then he put me on the right path, and I played hockey throughout college, and that's something that we've always shared. So when we moved back to Minot, that was a big deciding factor. Was when we lived in the UP, they only had club hockey. It was very expensive, lots of traveling. The rink was kind of closing. It wasn't doing very well. So that seemed to be very important for us, and we had family, and I guess family was close in Fargo, and then we had friends in Minot. So that was my favorite move back. I love Minot. I think it's great, but I definitely feel like it was just a stepping stone to coming here. So I kind of want to go back a little bit because we talked about, a little bit later on, or like recently in the last 10 years, but kind of want to talk about your childhood. What was that like? Were there any big milestones that happened that you felt kind of put you in the trajectory for where your life went? One thing that your sister, my aunt, Lisa, always says is that you loved to tinker when you were younger. So I wonder if that had to do anything with it.
Well, tinkering the garage was something I did once in a while, not probably as much as she may have thought. I had a lot of friends growing up. So I was probably...
You want the record to show that you had friends, you didn't just tinker by yourself? Is that
yes,
what you're
that's
trying
great.
to say? Okay.
Yeah, no, it's spent a lot of time away from the house, and not sure why. I just really enjoyed my friends and their families, and we spent a lot of time with them.
When you were tinkering, what kind of things were you building? Were you trying to engineer or invent new things?
Well, when I was old enough to weld, I guess that was probably one of the biggest things. I actually made a go-kart from scratch. Yeah, and of course, didn't have a lot of money back then, so it was really scrounging up things. Of course, my dad helped me a lot with that. But yeah, old snowmobile engine. I had 6 snowmobiles at one time when I was in my teens.
Wow.
They were just cheaps.
And how many cars did you have?
None.
Okay.
Sore spot.
I wish we had a lie detector over here.
No, I actually, when I was turning 16 and getting my driver's license, I ended up getting a motorcycle. That was kind of an interesting story, but I bought my dad's motorcycle actually, and so I had that instead of a car.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's kind of a sore spot.
When you were making the go-kart, did you run into any issues? Like you said that you were working on a budget, balling on a budget, but was there anything that you thought was kind of cool that you were able to make work when it shouldn't have?
Well, the cool thing was I could almost go 60 miles an hour with it, but the problem was that the wheels were, I think, from riding a lawnmower. So I was doing fine when you went straight, but as soon as I remember making my first turn on gravel, and it was kind of a sharp turn. Obviously, I wasn't going 60 at that point, but
oh my gosh!
But I was doing like probably 15 to 20 miles an hour, and I just took a big button U-turn, and the rubber just fell right off the rim. So,
did you ever hurt yourself growing up?
No.
Since you were so reckless?
Nope.
Wow.
That was probably
you had an
the
angel
most
on your
reckless.
shoulder.
Oh yeah.
Jeez.
Never broken a bone.
Didn't you break your wrist?
That was hockey when I was.
Oh, so that doesn't count?
I was like 45 years old when that happened. So
Yeah, but
not when I
you've
was
broken a
kid.
bone. Don't sit here and lie to everybody.
That was a hairline fracture.
Did Grandpa teach you how to weld then? Or were you kind of
Yes.
self-taught?
Yes. Nope. I watched him. Then he just kind of let me go after it. It was just a simple arc welder, stick welder. So fairly easy to manipulate compared to like TIG welding and maybe some other welding. MIG welding's pretty easy, of course. But no, I really enjoyed it. I had some friends that built some go-karts as well. So actually one of my best friends, he built a little sprint car is what he ended up building.
Oh, cool.
Because he was always that one-upsman.
To your go-kart?
Oh my gosh. So I was proud to have a 440cc 2-cylinder snowmobile engine. And back in those days, that was a pretty powerful engine, and that's why I was able to go 60 miles an hour with that thing. So he actually made a little sprint car. That's what I'm going to call it, because it wasn't fair.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a little bit more money. He was a good saver, but he got a 750cc motorcycle engine on his. He could actually do wheelies with his.
Oh wow, quite.
And
different.
then he had the proper tires, so that helped.
Not what did you say that they were? They were lawnmower tires.
Mine was lawnmower. His were probably more sprint car racing tires.
Something a little bit more appropriate. You said that your dad kind of led you down the path of welding, working with your hands, trying out different trades. Was there at any other point where you thought of doing something completely different? Like, did you ever have a hobby that would have taken you away from doing that, like cooking or, I don't know, business, accounting? Like, you're really good with numbers. Like, is there anything that's random that you ever considered?
Definitely not cooking.
You make good spaghetti.
Yeah, that's it. It's just the simplest meal.
That's okay.
But I'm happy with that. Not really. I think, strangely enough, I think my path was pretty well set as far as my interests and all that stuff. So it's not surprising that that's kind of what I went with, is what was comfortable, I guess, at that time.
Sure.
The more I look at it, but it's possible.
If you were to go back and do it, would you change anything?
Boy, that's a real good question. I don't know if I would. I guess as what I know now, I mean, if you could look back and actually make different choices, yeah, I would have went through a college. I would have gotten a college degree. Architecture probably would have been that road that I would have went down.
So, since Jen isn't here, we still want her to be as involved as possible, because Jen would have loved to do this interview with you. She just thinks the world of you. So, I have some questions from her, if you're ready to answer those.
I'm ready.
Okay. Number 1, what's your favorite color?
Orange.
Why?
Because it's not a primary. I don't know. I like orange.
What an odd answer. Because it's not primary. Okay. I swear you don't own anything orange, maybe one sweatshirt and a t-shirt.
I like orange. I think it's, a combination of colors is what I was kind of getting at.
Okay. Fair enough. How has fabrication changed since you started your career?
The career with Pop and Dot?
Sure. She didn't specify, but that's okay. You can take that and run with it however you want.
Well, of course, the clients is really what dictates kind of what we've done and where we're going to go. But I would say at least over the last couple of years, that the passion is kind of more into maybe making something a little bit more substantial in size. The project we did last summer, modifying a military ambulance into an RV, was
a
probably
big one.
It was a real good one. Videos to come on that one.
Yes, for sure. Once we find the time.
Yes. But, I think the more you learn, the more, you feel comfortable, the more you feel comfortable with the equipment. It just gives you the confidence, I guess, to try something new. And I can't wait till this year, as we've talked, looking forward to maybe making some changes to our...
There's a question at the end that maybe you can shed some light on that a little bit more.
Okay.
But, okay, that's cool. Good to know. When you say size-wise, this is a question from me now. I'll just piggyback off of what Jen asked you. Do you prefer maybe less tedious, small projects then, is what you're saying, and you like more big-scale, big-picture projects where there's maybe more engineering behind it and less like little nitpicking with things? That makes sense?
Yes, it does. I think it's kind of a combination, meaning that there are days that doing something smaller and is more enjoyable than maybe taking on something that might take a month or 2 months to actually execute. But I believe that the engineering side of things is always been the more fun part of whatever I'm working on. So, as you know, a lot of the things that we have done really do involve utilizing fasteners and tools and processes that I'm not used to or know very much of that. But
Besides welding, what's your favorite type of joinery to use?
well, I got to say that it's probably rivets. Don't mind the look, and the more I've learned about certain type of rivets, it's actually pretty exciting how strong they can be.
Okay. Would you say that it's comparable and similar to like the hold of a weld, or do you think it's a little bit less?
Well, it depends how good a welder you are.
Mm.
I
To your
think,
welds then.
I think, obviously welds are very, very strong. And if you get the proper thickness and proper materials and the proper welding and the penetration that you're supposed to get with welding, all of those things. But, when it comes down to like fasteners and rivets and things of that nature, it's just how is it being used? And I think that's the part that I'm learning is yeah, I could weld something together, maybe like this big military ambulance that we did.
Mm-hmm.
That was a riveted job with minor welding instead of the opposite. So learning the different types of fasteners that you can get on was probably pretty interesting. It just creates and opens a world of how to fabricate beyond welding.
I feel like a lot of people don't really know if they're not within that welding community or fabricating or even just used to like the shop life, that there's so many different ways to accomplish things. So I think that's one thing that I always try and tell people if they're starting off on a hobby. Maybe that's something that you would recommend to people, is just because you don't have the tools and you don't have maybe the welding, but maybe you do have a garage filled of other things. It's try and challenge yourself and see if you can problem solve using other things before investing money into something, because a lot of times you can make it work. So kind of like with your go-kart, you made it work.
Yep, made it work.
Okay, question number 3. What is your favorite part of what you do?
The engineering side of things. Yeah, I think the evaluating your options and then going down the road and making it happen. So again, with my drafting experience and design experience that I've had outside of just electrical, so I've designed homes and some other commercial type of structures and things like that, kind of probably more through school and things of that nature on the commercial side. But being part of the architecture engineering firms for the 5 years right after school, I got to see what others were doing. So, and truly the architects and stuff like that. So when you look at all the drawings, what they have to do to just construct a building, and you learn about all the different types of materials and then you start to get to see the stuff being built. A lot of that experience helps out.
Sure. This is a question that I have. Are you a visual learner, or do you need to be taught hands-on? Like, how do you think that you learn best?
Visual. Yeah. I would say that the majority of the things that I've learned to do was watching others, and I'll call them professionals because I've always had that exposure, helping others out, maybe a side jobs here and there type of thing, but then you learn from those professionals. But I was always a good learner when it came to watching people and their techniques. It's not so much what the tool's doing, but it's what their arm and hand and wrists are doing, if you will, to really see what kind of the motions and then, talking to them about it. So, and then start practicing. And that's what it is. You just go out there and go after it and just be confident. And I remember the very first time I ever threw mud on drywall, and I didn't thin it down. It was like the consistency of a real thick peanut butter. Well, if you can about imagine, it was a disaster, and it took me a lot of hours of sanding, but I learned. So just a tip, not peanut butter. You want it the consistency of mayonnaise.
Gross. How do you stay motivated to create?
Wow, motivation. That's a tough one, especially nowadays.
Don't talk to me about that. That question's for you. I still struggle with that myself.
I think, especially nowadays. Okay, so retired, kind of not retired. Of course, with the business that we're doing, it's like you have to motivate yourself. And I've definitely had my lulls. Right now I'm kind of more on an upbeat side of things where I really want to get through projects. Maybe it's because I want to get to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
But the last few projects have been big, so those kind of take it out of you. And
maybe not a lot of variation.
True. And I guess that kind of goes back to even previous questions. It's like, what do you enjoy? It's like, I would say most of the time it's smaller projects that you can engineer, execute, fabricate more quickly, and then you can move on to the next one.
Now that you're retired, do you feel like you've kind of had to reinvent how you go about your day-to-day life? Like, do you feel that you've had to go back to the drawing board of how you typically operate? You have a lot of time. Basically, you're your own boss. Before with Enbridge or other places, yes, you were managing other people, but you yourself had a manager and you had operations and processes put in place for you. Do you find it challenging or overwhelming at all where you have to kind of do that yourself and maybe it's easier to fall off the wheel sometimes?
I think what can be challenging is not knowing all of the things that you need to do to run a small business. We've learned so much in the last couple of years, and even from taxes and accounting and things of that nature. It could be things that the state requires of new companies. I would say those are probably the things that are more challenging than anything, is just making sure that you understand everything about the business. And I'm even still far from it, I think. I think there's more to learn. I think we're doing the right things.
What is your favorite band, song, or style of music? I'm trying to think of the things that you play in the shop. For a while when we had an, I guess you could call him a part-time employee intern. We had Will. Whenever I'd come into the shop and say hi, you always had Queen.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say more of my favorite over the years have been actually jazz related. I haven't listened to them very much lately, but Maynard Ferguson is probably one of my favorite bands of all time. So when I was younger, of course, he was around. He was a trumpet player, but their jazz band, Maynard Ferguson, it was just incredible. I went to one of their concerts when I was young, and I was like probably in the front row. I think that was probably the only concert that I was in the front row.
I picture you're like, woo! Like a rock concert, but it's jazz, and he's just belting out on the trumpet. That's
funny. Hey, I gotta fill people in.
Yeah, exactly.
So, since 6th grade to 12th grade, I played saxophone. So I started off playing the baritone sax, which is a larger one that kind of rests on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And then went to tenor when I got up my last couple of years of high school. But in 9th grade was probably the best year because we started a jazz band in our little town of Hawley. It's one thing that we always had really good musicians in Hawley. So we had an excellent concert band. Our conductor at that time, the instructor, he was really fabulous. He was kind of a psycho, but maybe you have to be when you're
kind of have to be,
good.
Yeah, if you're good.
No, he was great, and he really gave his all to us. And so 9th grade, we had 11th and 12th, or basically all the seniors and juniors above me. They were just unbelievable musicians. So we had, for a first year jazz band, we actually got second in nationals. That was the thing. And one of the Maynard Ferguson was the band that I liked the most and tried to mimic the most. So,
is there anybody that you would like to see in concert nowadays?
It's probably the older bands like, Huey Lewis was a favorite of ours. And other than that, I think, like Chicago, that's another
great band.
Yeah, that's a favorite. We actually went to a concert not too long ago, probably about, it's probably about 7 years ago now.
Chicago, or was it Boston?
Oh, that's right. That one was Boston.
I was going to say.
Well, we missed the Chicago one. That's right.
That's a bummer. That would have been really cool.
But that's another great band. Boston. Love them.
Jen really got a lot on that question. I do have a follow-up question, though, because I find it interesting that you really like music, but a lot of the times you'll drive or work in silence. Can you share as to why that is? Because I used to find it very weird, but now sometimes I drive and I don't have anything going on in the background, but I want to hear why you don't.
I think I stay more awake when my mind is going, but also too is when we've gone on those long trips and drive. That's my time to kind of first you kind of winding down from whatever activities and other things or responsibilities that I was having. So, but usually what I would do when I drive is just think about things that I want to do. Maybe design a house in my head, maybe think about the future of our business and stuff like that, and maybe doing something bigger and bolder for us that might be a little bit uncomfortable. And it's like, okay, there's a lot of details in that. So
does it ever stress you out when you have all those thoughts racing through your head that are really important, really big, and then you can't get them out?
That doesn't stress me out. It's just kind of bums me out at times because I don't have a good process to record my thoughts. So meaning
maybe we need to get you a recorder so you can just press the button and be like, Gregg Harrom, 3/18/24.
Everything will stay on tape and it'll be there forever. It'll never be taught.
No, they'll come to surface in like 200 years in some time capsule. Can we get a short summary of your creative/fabrication process? And she has an example in here. For example, the lift bridge project from this past summer.
Well, that was a fun project.
Do you want to explain maybe a little bit so people can kind of put a visual to your process? Okay.
Well, we had a project, as you know of, a client that came to us, Duluth Chamber.
Yep. It was the Great Duluth Race.
Correct.
Basically, that was a team business bonding, team building event that came about. And for the Great Duluth Race, they had themes and every group dressed up in a different theme. And then they went around to businesses throughout Duluth where they had to basically do a scavenger hunt and complete different tasks and whatnot. So that's what the Great Duluth Race was. And they had asked us to fabricate a trophy for them.
Right. And that trophy was based off of the aerial lift bridge. So perfect. Right up my alley. Straight lines. So taking a couple pictures of
architecture.
The lift bridge. Oh, yeah, exactly. Taking a couple of pictures. But anyway, of course, we were far enough into using the tools that we have in the shop where now it's like, okay, we can make something really ornate, really cool. But again, using my process, I guess, for that was first the idea is what are we going to do? And for me, this one came out really easy. It was just taking flat metal and plasma cutting out shapes. And of course, all those shapes were the different sides that you would see on the tower. That process was going from the idea to the photos to the engineering. Basically, get the drafting done, get it drawn to scale, if you will, a scale, as small as it was at that time. So the whole thing was probably 2 feet long and about 18 inches tall, so roughly to give people an idea. So with that being said, once that engineering was kind of done, then it was just taking the metal and getting that file set up for cutting out with the CNC plasma. The process just goes, you cut out all your shapes, you clean them, you get them over and grind all the edges, get all the dross off. That's all the slag that gets kind of shoved through that plasma cutting process. So
for people who don't speak in welding or in plasma cutting, that's basically, if you think about warming up hot metal, sometimes it will bubble or get crusty on the sides, and it's basically all the stuff that you don't want. It almost is like the burnt toast of metal. It's just like all the crud that you kind of have to scrape off to get to the good stuff.
That's a very artistic way of explaining it.
I have to play towards both sides,
I guess.
That's why we work so well together. So after you had that set up.
Yeah. So once you get all the metal prepped at that point, then you can get into, in this case, it was welding all the sides together to make the shape of the bridge and the lift bridge. And of course, we added what you would see on the ground, whether it be water. So we dealt with like 3 or 4 different layers of grass and concrete and and the water and the pier and just all of that kind of stuff, just to kind of give it that more of a 3D effect. But also too, as you're thinking about the next steps, which is we use powder coating now. So you have to be able to powder coat. Mainly we like to powder coat one color for one piece of metal. So if you layer 3 pieces of metal, you can get 3 different colors, and you just have that 3D appearance, of course. But anyway, so after welding it together and cleaning it, then it's just powder coat. A fun process. I'm really glad that we invested in some decent equipment to do that. It's been a great experience.
I could not imagine if we had to still paint everything. I think we had one project and it went wrong and never dried. And then I think after that, it was like, we're powder coating. I think literally that next week you bought the powder coat oven and every accessory you would need. It was a Golden Knights, one of our first LED signs, wasn't it?
No.
Oh.
Superior.
It was Superior Cannabis Company.
Yep,
this is another plug. They're some of our really close friends. They're a great family-owned, Minnesota-made business. They're located specifically or like based in Austin, Minnesota, Spam Town, but they were one of our first clients, and I forgot that they were the ones we went and got this specialty, almost automotive paint
in a spray can,
because that's what we had to resort to, was just doing thin layers, letting it dry, but we didn't realize that there was a hardener at the bottom of the can that you needed to release. Yep. So it just
release and then shake it up, right?
Never dried. It was always, it was dry to the touch, but it was impressionable.
It was gummy.
So we laid it over before we did all of like the LED soldering and fixed the lighting on the back. We flipped it on a packing blanket. And when we flipped it back over, that beautiful pattern of the blanket was just
embossed.
Pressed right into it. And then Gregg said, we will be powder coating next week. I will order everything. Basically, timeline sped up a little bit, but again, this is a really good way of like learning lessons. We didn't want it. We want to make sure that the quality of our products, we're kind of taking away that level of possibly making mistakes by just investing up, I guess. It's a good way to put it.
Well, and just so it's said, that automotive paint I've used in spray cans before, but years ago they used to mix the hardener with the paint, so you didn't have to.
Well, so I don't know who you need to take that up with, but
yeah, that was learning.
Things are different now.
It was a learning experience, but
yeah, that's for sure. What do you do? They ended up liking the sign. I do want to put that out there.
Oh yeah, they loved it.
So.
Yep. And, we did what we try to do for every customer, is make things right. So we actually cut out a new piece and powder coated it and replaced the one that was bad.
Maybe that's what today's disclaimer is about, because that could be something that people take away as small businesses. Yes, not being a perfectionist, because you're going to make mistakes. However, be honorable in your work and be willing to kind of right those wrongs, even if you do have to bite a little bit of the budget. Just invest back into your client and make sure that what they're getting is exactly what they wanted. And yes, sometimes it's going to take a little bit more time or money, but it's usually worth it in the end to fix your mistakes. We have 2 more questions.
Okay.
What is the best piece of advice you have received from a coworker, boss, mentor over the past years?
2 things come to mind.
Okay.
We'll start with the one that's probably hurts the worst. Well, it's part of my personality. And especially being a loving engineering and drafting, is that I probably get into the design, into the weeds, into the details a little too much. So that's probably been one of the more things. It could be just a simple conversation that leads into maybe make some decisions. And maybe it's my way to just, where my brain works is, let's get in those weeds. Let's talk about the details, because it's important. At least I feel it's important. So that's probably one of the one things that they always thought that maybe I could relax on, is going into the details. So that was always, that's a building thing.
Who did that come from? Was it a coworker or boss?
It was a boss.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could see how that
it was
one would hurt.
Maybe 3 bosses. No, no, it's, other than that, I think it's the one thing that I learned most, especially in supervisor and management, is trust. It's the biggest thing. And I don't know, maybe I think I've always had that, but I think hearing it from people that you look up to, and especially people that are successful, when they say that they trust me, and and then eventually that turns into is really taking the time to trust others and letting things go. If they fall, be there for them and help them up.
You talked about people who are successful. It made me wonder, because we're in completely different generations, and I think that that's something that's very different between myself and you growing up. What do you view as successful? And it can be multiple things. It could be simple, it could be complicated, but I'm interested to hear your perspective on that.
I think being successful means that you have people that care about you. That's probably the biggest part of success, I think, is just making people happy, that they were, especially strangers, people, even for us, we'll talk about the business, clients, when they learn about us and they are excited because they love the idea of what our company is, Pop and Dot. So father, daughter doing the best they can. But
Did you ever once think that success came from monetary value or how much you made?
maybe years, a long time ago it was, yeah. I mean, obviously success is, or can be, definitely monetary, and that's fine. But I think the older you get, and that can kind of help make your life more comfortable if you're smart about it.
Right.
But I think it's really the people around you. If you have people around you that care about you and reach out to you and stuff like that, that's success.
I would agree. That's cool to hear you say, because I do find it really fascinating that some people, they're really stuck on, I'm not going to be successful until I'm making 3 figures, until I'm making 200K, or it's the materialistic things that they own. So it's nice to hear somebody think that it's more who you're surrounded by, the experiences you've had, the memories that you have, because I do feel like it's a lot of people my age, a lot of men specifically, who are constantly reading self-help books and quick ways to make money and investing in properties. And it's like all these things that these super rich older guys are telling them. It's so easy, just, reach out and grab it. And, then you have Bitcoin and all these crazy things popping up. But I do think that it really is as simple as what you just said. So I agree. Last question is, what is one piece of advice you would give to anybody starting fresh in a new career?
Take the time that it deserves to be successful in that, because obviously you are going into a career that hopefully that you really like. Most people do, right? That's take the time, let it evolve on its own. If you have goals, make smaller goals. Don't put out huge goals that may not be achievable, because they could be a negative thing that you may experience. So I think break it down and just let it evolve on its own.
That is really good advice. Don't be in such a rush to get to the finish line, because then you don't get to enjoy all the things on the way there.
Right.
I would also piggyback that and say take your time, but also as you reach milestones, give yourself a pat on the back and make sure that you're celebrating those small wins and those little things that you're accomplishing, because it might be scary once you reach that level of success in a new career and you look back and you're like, wow, that's really sad. I didn't give myself any credit during the times that I should have. So I agree, though.
Yeah. Well, it's like a lot of things that we do in life. There's so many things that are involved, and you may not know of everything that needs to be done for the career choice that you have or the task at hand. You're probably doing a lot of learning, new experiences and things like that. So I think that's where, making sure that you're thorough and that you're comfortable and that you're happy when you're done.
Yeah, I think that if you have the mindset that you can never stop learning, that you'll never, I almost always want to keep in my head that I'm never going to be an expert at anything, that I'm always chasing that, because then I'm always educating myself and working on new things. And it also keeps me humble too, because I never want, like, I would Jen and I say it all the time on the podcast, we're professionals, we're not experts. Like, there's somehow a little bit of a difference there. Like, we do know what we're talking about. There's a lot of education behind it, a lot of time invested, but at the same time, we can always do better. There's more we can learn. I also think that it's important to learn about other things, because you talk about how you've had all these different experiences in your career and how you kind of refer to those maybe in your head when you're coming up with a new concept or a new design, and you're like, oh, I used to design houses, and there was this one time we had to problem solve this joinery issue or something like that. Maybe that would be helpful in this thing that I'm fabricating. So the more life experiences you get, it's just more helpful for any career path that you go down. So to wrap it up, I have one last question for you, but I do want to say thank you, Jen. She's going to be listening to this on Friday, so wonderful questions.
Thank you, Jen, for all of the questions.
They were really good.
Yes,
they were. I'm glad that
definitely.
She did that.
Probably didn't come across as bubbly as Jen, though.
That's okay. Not all of us can.
No.
Jen has a really good friend, and their name is Katie, and I met them at 190, and they were just saying, oh, Jen's so positive all the time. And I was like, what about me? I'm pretty positive, right? But in comparison to Jen, she just lights up all the rooms. So last question, and you can be as detailed or as vague as you want, but what are you excited about in the future for Pop and Dot? And are there any changes coming up?
Well, hopefully there will always be changes, meaning that we'll always look for new opportunities, for one. But what is most exciting, I guess, continuing working with my daughter. That's the most exciting thing. And keeping that train going. That's the first thing. And making sure that we're both happy.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever that means as far as the work that we do, so be it. But as long as we're successful in that way,
mm-hmm.
is being happy and just keep working together. That's the main thing. But as far as a big change moving forward, yeah, we are looking for possibly a change in what our business is going to be in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I want to do a spoiler alert right now. I don't think so.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to keep that open just in case. Yep. But I will add on to that and just say, yes, I think that the reason why we've reached any monetary, any visual, physical success is because we've worked together. I don't think that we could have gotten this far without one another. I think
for sure
what we have is very special. So that's also my goal, is to continue working together, but being open-minded that if things shift and things change, to kind of welcome it with open arms instead of fight it, because I think it's too easy to sit back and be like, oh, that won't work. But it's like, let's just try it. You know, what's the worst that could happen?
That's
we
right.
invest a little bit of time and money. Well, now we know it doesn't work, and we'll never have to wonder again, instead of potentially losing sleep or some driving time, since that's what you choose to do when you're driving, is think about all these big things instead of just listening to some nice soft jazz, which you should be.
Probably should.
But that is the episode. Is there anything else that you want to add before we...
Well, just want to thank you and Jen, but I'm really happy that I had the opportunity to talk. Don't like really talking about myself like this.
Yeah, you're tensing up as you say it.
That's for sure. But so it's not my wheelhouse, but no, this was fun, and it was. I just look forward to the future, wherever that takes us.
Well, I do want to say thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for being on Call It. It was really cool. For episode number 10, Jen and I talked about doing something special, and you're our first guest, so that's a really cool thing. And I do want to say that I have never heard anything but nice things about you. So I know you don't like talking about yourself, but people love talking about how wonderful you are and all the cool things that you do. And they basically just say you're like the nicest person ever. So I hope you know that
nice.
People want to hear from you because they love you. And so this will be really important.
Well, what a better platform than your and Jen's Call It podcast.
Absolutely.
It's awesome. I'm very proud of you both.
Yeah.
But obviously, you're my daughter, so super proud of you.
You have to be proud. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. There's no choice.
But for Jen, it's organic. That's nice.
That's right.
All right. Well, we will see you guys next week for another episode. Jen will be back with us. But for now, we will see you later.
See you later, everybody. Thank you.